May the peace of the Lord be always with you. At the age of 18, when I first went out to live on my own at Berkeley, at college, I had all my classes in the same room and in the room across the corridor from it. It was a vast lecture hall called Dwinell Hall. And I have vivid memories of sitting in the sunshine along Strawberry Creek out in front of Dwinell Plaza, listening to a folk singer who used to dress all in white. And he had the most beautiful long brown hair, and his name was Julian. And he was only a little older than me, and I remember the most vivid song that I remember him singing was a song by Neil Young called Sugar Mountain. And it goes like this. Oh, to live on Sugar Mountain with the barkers and the colored balloons. You can't be 20 on Sugar Mountain, though you're thinking that you're leaving there too soon. You're leaving there too soon. It's so noisy at the fair, but all your friends are there. And the candy floss you had, and your mother and your dad. Oh, to live on Sugar Mountain. And I remember those moments with such exquisite intensity, because I too missed my mom, I missed my dad, I missed my brother, and I missed all of those county fair moments of my other life. There was something deep in me that resisted growing up, and yet I knew I had to. How many of you as parents experienced the birth of your own child as a kind of miracle? That is the kind of growing up I'm talking about. Jesus promises that we can embrace change with equanimity, with a kind of deep and centered peace. So today I'm asking, how do we mature in our understanding of resurrection? And I'm going to share two pictures of the resurrection that you might find helpful. Now, many people have been remembering the legacy of Pope Francis this week. He died on Monday, and I had very little ever to do with him. I really didn't, our paths didn't cross. But it did bring to mind a monk who taught me a great deal. So years ago, when we were in our 20s, Heidi and I were walking across Cambridge, and we were in Harvard Square, and it was this terrible freezing rain. You know what that's like in March. It's like 40 degrees out, and the rain is 40 degrees. It was miserable, and it was dusk, so you could hardly see anything. But then we heard kind of from the distance off to the side a voice saying, "Malcolm, Heidi." It was almost like it was so far away we almost didn't hear it. And it turned out to be Tom Shaw. Now, Tom Shaw was an Episcopal monk. He was the former superior of the Society of St. John the Evangelist, and he was also, at that time, the bishop of the second largest diocese in the country. And at the time, we didn't know him well at all, and we couldn't help but ask. We said, "How did you ever recognize us?" And in his own very typical self-effacing way, Tom said that some bishops are going to be remembered as great biblical scholars, and others are going to be remembered as accomplished administrators, some as dynamic preachers, others as great theologians or fundraisers or leaders. And he said, "I don't know why, but I'm simply the one who remembers people's names." And I think that's pretty good. You know, it's what we need in our life. And maybe for someone in his office, it's even more important. Now, as part of the process that got him elected to be bishop, they held meetings across the Diocese of Massachusetts. And these meetings were very uncomfortable because it was an intense time. It was a really political time. And during the question and answer period, one earnest and intense young man asked Tom the same question that he had asked the other previous candidates for bishop. And so in a mildly confrontational way, you can imagine this very conservative-looking young man gets up and he says, "Sir, do you believe in the physical resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ from the dead?" And that's just how he said it. And Tom thought for a minute, and he said, "Do you want the short answer or the long answer?" And the man, I think, thought he was trying to get out of answering the question. He said, "I want the short answer." And so Tom said, "Yes." Next question. And you can imagine, like, all the hands in the room went up. Everybody raised their hand. I want to know the answer, the long answer to your question. And so this is what Tom said. And he began by addressing that young man. He said, the long answer begins with some questions for you to answer. And first, he said, by physical resurrection, do you mean that Jesus could suddenly appear even when the doors were locked, as in the story of Thomas? And the questioner, when asked this, kind of hemmed and hawed. And Tom Shaw went on. He said, my second question for you is this. Do you remember one of the earliest written accounts of the resurrection in Paul's letter to the church at Corinth? Paul said that Christ appeared first to Cephas, that's Peter, then to the 12, then to more than 500 others, then to James, then to the apostles, and last of all, as to one untimely born, even to me. So by the physical resurrection, do you mean that Paul too experienced the physical resurrection of Christ on the road to Damascus, as is described in the book of Acts, that story when Paul is knocked senseless by a bright light? He hears a voice calling to him. Other people who were traveling with him did not see the bright light. They just saw that he was made blind. And Tom said, was this the physical resurrection? And the young man had no response, but he seemed to be thinking about it. And Tom said, finally, my last question refers to the time when Jesus was walking unrecognized with his disciples as they were on the road to Emmaus. And when they arrived at their destination, they invited him to share a supper. And when he took, broke, and blessed the bread, Luke writes, quote, their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight, end quote. So Jesus did not get up and walk out the door, he vanished. Is that an example of physical resurrection? And again, the questioner, who didn't really expect this much of an answer, did not have very much to say. Now, Tom was incredibly gentle and kind and thoughtful man, and so he went on and he said this, my point is that the appearances of Christ were quite different. And what makes them seem true is that they sounded like the truth. When Tom said that, you could have heard a pin drop in that room as everyone thought about what this might mean for them. And that, I think, is the point. That Christ appears to each of us in different ways, according to our disposition, our circumstances, maybe even according to what we can handle or assimilate at the time. Henry David Thoreau writes, could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant? What is most real about reality is also what is most individual. Now that's the first part, and the second part's much shorter, because it's kind of my short take on the resurrection based on Tom's observation. Now for me and for millions of people over history and for 2 billion Christians who are alive today, there's something that seems real and compelling about these various accounts of the resurrection. And in crucial ways, they match my own experience of the resurrected Christ. They are subjective truths that refer to the greatest truth about the meaning of our life. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my perspective on resurrection. And this is a hard thing. I woke up this morning at 5:30 in the morning. I was like, should I tell them this or should I not? Because this is a little hard to hear, and it's a little complicated too. And it's this. One of the biggest mistakes, and it's repeated everywhere when you're interpreting the Bible, is to try to make stories written by different authors over different time periods as if they all fit into a single narrative. Now, we do this all the time, like when we refer to John the Baptist as Jesus' cousin. In one of the gospel accounts, it is Jesus' cousin. In the other, it's not. But particularly we see this, and I'm the most guilty of this than anyone you've ever met, in Christmas pageants, right? So in Christmas pageants, we put details from the Gospel of Matthew. So that's the story of the evil king, the magi, the wise men who come from a distance, the escape to Egypt. That's one story. And we jam it all together with the story from Luke, which is about the census and going to be counted and going to Bethlehem, and there's no room in the inn, and the ordinary shepherds come. We put all of them together and act as if it's one story. But we miss something very important when we do this. Earlier, I quoted how Jesus appeared to Peter in the book of John, and Jesus, according to that account, according to Paul, Peter is the first person that Jesus appears to. And then in the book of John, what we just heard last week, it's clear that Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene first. And my point is that in some ways, these stories contradict each other. So what I ask you this morning is, what unites them? What do these stories of the resurrection share in common? Now, Rowan Williams, the old archbishop, used to say that Jesus' coming back in itself is not good news. So Jesus coming back, the mere fact of Jesus coming back, would have been very not good news for his disciples if the ones who had abandoned him had thought that he was coming back for justice or for retribution or for revenge or punishment. But instead, in every single resurrection account, as in the story of Jesus' whole life, every part of it is about forgiveness and love. That is what everything shares in common. The Spirit of God, the Spirit of love, dwells in Jesus completely. So when Jesus appears to his friends in that locked room in the story of John in the book of John that we just read, Jesus breathes his Spirit upon his friends. And this is the spirit of knowing God intimately as a father, more intimate than we are to ourselves. It is this Spirit, his Spirit, which leads us to experience life as a gift that we share through love and forgiveness. It is his Spirit that gives us confidence that even death cannot separate us from the Creator's love. So you can imagine, after hearing from his friends that Jesus had met them and given them this gift, the Apostle Tom was upset. Thomas announced that unless he touched, and the word in Greek is balo, it's like violence, like throw, like the way you throw a baseball. Unless I throw my fingers into the wounds of his hands, I will not believe, is what Thomas said. And he said this because he thought that he had missed out on that Spirit. But he did not miss out on that Spirit, and you and I didn't miss out on the Spirit either. Now, at the age of 18, when I was sitting outside that classroom, I understood that I would have to one day grow up in my life and in my faith. But we do not decide what to believe on our own. God offers us help. I received that help from an old, wise monk bishop named Thomas Shaw. Jesus cannot be prevented by any locked door from giving us a deep and centering peace that passes all understanding. In the face of the inhumanity we see everywhere around us, Jesus breathes that Spirit on us. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet come to believe. All will be made alive in Christ. May the peace of the Lord be always with you.